Here this morning at the beautiful St Nicholas Church as part of our 12 Ipswich medieval churches walk. It is currently used by the Diocese of St Edmundsbury and Ipswich, as a conference centre. It's had a few uses in order to try to save it. The church itself dates back from the 1300s and was subsequently refitted in 1849. The 15th century tower was rebuilt in 1886, and as you can see, it is under scaffold. I do have other video footage and photographs that I'll include in the video just so you can get a good look at the beauty of this church. It has all these fabulous tabletop tombs in the graveyard. Although they are magnificent looking, I think the initial reason behind this was back in the day when we used to have body snatchers, or the hospitals who used to exhume the bodies to be used for medical science. As you can see, the beautiful annex that they put down the side here, and that was in order to put in the little conference centre and make the church more usable. It did actually have a cafe in there at one point. We'll just come around and have a look at some of the features. Look at the door. Amazing. Just amazing. So St Nicholas was built in the 14th century on the site of an Anglo-Saxon church which was dedicated to St Michael. It has Saxon and Norman reliefs from this church, and they are now in the north chancel wall. Unfortunately, we can't go in because the church is closed. And this church, with all its treasures, was made redundant in 1984. And the diocese repurchased it for £1 to develop that conference centre that we saw with that new glass linked building. But since then it's been in the care of the Ipswich Churches Trust, and it's been put up for sale again. I'm just hoping it isn't made into something undesirable, because that would be a real big shame. The church consists of a nave with aisles of flint and rubble construction, of 4 bays with a clerestory, but with the 15th century dormers at the east. I'm trying to get the best views I can of this, but unfortunately the feature, of course, the tower being under scaffolding. The medieval font, which is at the side, of course, came by exchange from St Lawrence in the 1860s, pardon me, and the Romanesque sculptures, a bull, tympanum, St Michael fighting the dragon. I'm just going to have a little wander around to the other side of the graveyard. I'll grab what I can on this noisy road of the tower. But I will insert pictures. This is a beautiful church. Yes, St Michael fighting the dragon and figures of apostles came from the chapel of Our Lady of Grace, which is on Lady Lane. Now that was all taken apart during the dissolution when Henry stamped his feet and became head of the Church of England. So as you can see, they have pretty much taken over the churchyard as well. The first were mounted outside high up on the west wall on the south side, and you have to look for the mural memorial to William Beeston Point, whose botanical gardens I discuss in another video. They're across the road from the church, but these beautiful stones in this cemetery, and since last time I was here it has been all the grass has been cut and it's been a bit more manicured, which is nice to see. This was the church where Wolsey's family worshipped during the Cardinal's boyhood. It was built almost entirely in the 16th century, but there was an earlier church on this site. Excuse the traffic noise, there's not much we can do about that at this time in the morning. And Wolsey's parents are said to be buried here. Where? I don't know. I have had a good look, although as you can see most of the headstones are pretty much worn. I'm from 1500s. I doubt I would be able to find them. I was looking for something a little bit more select, like something like this, as he was a man of importance, but you just never know. I have consulted with Simon Knott and Boring Van Loon, who do fantastic pages for this sort of thing, and neither of them are aware where Wolsey's parents could possibly be buried. Anyway, we'll end this one here, and we will go on now and have a look at another fabulous medieval church in the town. To start here, mainly because we get a good view of the side of the church, and hopefully less traffic noise because we're far away from the lights. This is St Peter's Church on College Street in Ipswich, known as St Peter's by the Waterfront. Again, one of the 12 medieval churches in the ancient borough of Ipswich. An Augustinian priory, which was originally dedicated to St Peter and Paul, and this occupied a 6-acre site to the north and east of the church, and the secular canons regularly used the chancel here for religious purposes, leaving the nave for use for the parishioners. Very nice of them. The church was also known as St Peter's and St Paul's. The church is located now between College Street and Star Lane, with St Peter's leading north into Ipswich town centre. And again, apologise for the traffic noise. The location is probably the earliest church building in Ipswich, there being a St Peter's Church mentioned in the Domesday Book. I'm just wandering down so you can get the full impact of the building. The church was located just north of the fording point, so it was very prominent, and the visitors arriving into Ipswich could find it easily. They just had to cross the River Orwell. January of 1297, Edward I married his youngest daughter, Elizabeth of Roublon, to John I, Count of Holland, in the earlier church. The existing structure here was built in 1460 and contains a Tournai marble font, which dates from 1170 to 1190. The current building dates from the 15th century and was taken over by Cardinal Wolsey to become his college chapel, and the parishioners were then having to go to the neighbouring churches of St Nicholas and St Mary, which you can see in the background here. That's St Mary at Quay. So they would have likely been pushed out to that place. Wolsey ordered several improvements to St Peter's, but unfortunately when he fell from grace, the parishioners got their church back in 1537. Right, so we're going to wander down and cross the road and go and have a look at the front. Right, luckily lights have changed, perfect. We have the perfect view. In 1801, the church experienced an evangelical revival order. So I'm going to come over here because again we've got construction projects. It looks like every church is going to be having something done to it. Look at the magnificent tower here. In 1801, the church experienced an evangelical revival under the talented preacher Reverend Edward Griffin, who packed the church to hear him preach, and he established one of the first Anglo-Saxon Sunday schools here. Ironically, I was married by a Reverend Griffin, although I doubt it was the same one. In the latter half of the 19th century, the church had a lot of restoration done to it. Well, it looks by the building material, although these are bricks, they look more like paper bricks. Sitting here waiting. The south porch was rebuilt, having previously served as a coal cellar. Not a great end, is it? Look at the detail on this. You'll notice that the niches in here are empty. Thanks to Henry, who had them all removed. And in 1877, an ugly gallery which ran the entire length of the south aisle was removed and a new chancel arch was built. This has lots of detail. It's a very tall tower. If I'm not mistaken, it's something like 87 feet. Probably more, could be 93. I will add that to my video. The old box pews were removed, an organ chamber was built in the south side, and the arcade piers were rebuilt and underpinned with brick, which was unearthed when the church interior was renovated in 2006. Just going to have a little wander around here, although everything seems to be under construction at the moment. I have been through the churchyard, it is beautiful, so I'll see if I can add some of that to the video. Many of the features on the church can be viewed today when it opens on Heritage Days, which are in September. I can't promote those enough. They're great, especially for local people, and you can go inside. The church also holds the Ipswich Charter hangings, and those are definitely worth a view. It's sort of our version, modern day version of the bio tapestry. So I'm just going to go around the side, and the traffic has calmed a slightly bit, and have a look at the gate. And of course, it would be remiss, there we go, look at the detail on here. Look at the detail on the gates. How magnificent is that? Unfortunately, it's not open, but you can see the detail there on the church door. Looks like the original door has been removed, probably inside to preserve the wood, and they've put this metal structure up. And I do see a little sign down the side there that says Ipswich Charter hangings. Definitely worth coming in for a view of those. It would be remiss of me not to walk down and just view Wolsey's Gate. You can then see why Wolsey wanted to assume St Peter's and St Paul's as part of the priory. Again, look at the churchyard. It is well manicured, it is well kept. It's very important in the town. Have a quick view through the gate. There we are. And of course, pride of place, Wolsey's Gate. This would have been the water gate, the entrance to the college from the water, because the water would have been around here before the river was diverted. So yet another one of our magnificent 12 medieval churches. Let's carry on. This church here is St Mary at Quay, known now to locals as River Church. This is the medieval church that stands on Quay Street and just along from St Peter's, which you can see in the distance. So as you can see, quite a few churches in the vicinity. It would appear that we're early and there is a service in attendance at the moment. This was formerly known as Quay Church and the Church of Our Lady Star of the Sea, Stella Maris. The church is constructed of flint with stone dressings. Its plan includes a nave with a clerestory, north and south aisles, transepts and a west tower. The key weather vane on the tower, which I will step back so that you can see, right at the top there, let me zoom in. You can see it is the shape of a key. That key, believe it or not, is 5 feet in length. Inside the church, which we can't go in today because there is a service and it is early morning, so that's nice that people are in service at that time. The roof sports a beautiful double hammer beam roof with carvings of the apostles, important figures in Ipswich history, and other designs, of course. And inside the church is a beautiful white 15th century octagonal font. Now the font was originally removed from the church and it was taken to a church in Brantham, and we can only assume that it was taken there for safekeeping because it was again returned, and it is now in the church, and it is behind glass because it is a beautiful piece, and of course we don't want grubby fingers all over it. Also inside the church is the tomb and the brass of Henry Tooley. I don't believe these are the originals because they appear to have been removed to Christchurch Mansion, and also the Pounder brass as well from Thomas Pounder. And like Henry Tooley, he was an Ipswich merchant. He did a lot for the local community. Look at the beautiful designs around this doorway. I mean, for this to survive hundreds of years and still look like this is just astounding. You can see, you know, some of it is worn. I mean, who wouldn't be after 500 years standing out in the elements? But the detail is just fabulous. We'll walk around and have a look at the gates. This is the side view, and it has the clocks on each side. Now the beautiful wrought iron gates that we're going to see were made by Arthur Clarke. I'll come back to the other doorway. Looks like somebody left their gloves. Now these were monogrammed and made by Arthur Clarke, who was an art smith. And you can see the key symbol is in between the S and the M. And as we look up again, we can see the key on the top of the tower. The current St Mary's building was built about 1450 and 1550. I'll just poke through the gate so you can have a look. Now that modern extension was put up as a result of subsidence. And this was the site of an earlier church that stood here back in the 1200s in the Dockland area of the time, as it was the centre of a merchant community. Again, one of the 12 medieval churches and one of 3 Dockland churches. During the 18th century, the focus of economic activity moved away from the Docklands, and the size of the congregation just declined significantly, and over the years flooding of the church caused the structural problems. But look at this beautiful structure that was added to the side. And now when I say beautiful, it's very modern on the inside, looking into the garden, and as you can see they get that fabulous view of the church. But look at the side, look at the materials. They built it in keeping, and you know, to walk past here and see this structure, you would think it was part of the original. You know, to an untrained eye, you would say that was an original piece of structure. So what happened in order to make this happen was they had to fill the basement, the vaults, with concrete in order to keep it upright, because the church was actually leaning, and it was leaning over at such a rate that over time it would have tipped. So thankfully they put in all that time and saved it. In 1940 to 42, during the Second World War, this church was damaged by bombs. And unless you've noticed, and I will go round the other way through the car park, it has no stained glass. All of its stained glass was lost, which is a shame. Being close to the waterfront and having the water ingress into the church, the salt water caused a lot of decay. A lot of decay, and the columns and the arcades were really suffering. And during the excavations, where they had to dig out the foundations of the church, they discovered lots of Ipswich ware. And Ipswich ware was pottery back in the day, 700 to 850 AD. And graves were exhumed in the archaeological excavation in order to put up that beautiful new extension. So yes, take a look, no stained glass, which is a shame. Quite peaceful here now the traffic has died down. But a magnificent church, worth a visit. I will add some photographs. I do have lots of video of this church as well. But this one not being under construction, we are able to see the tower in detail. So let's move on to our next church. This church is St. Mary at Stoke. This is a Grade 1 listed Anglican church in the Old Stoke area of Ipswich, on the location of Stoke Street and Belstead Road. The church stands in the prominent position near the foot of a ridge just south of Stoke Bridge, and the town centre parish was a small farming community which saw a great increase in population with the coming of the railway when it came into Ipswich. It's a very pretty church, very pretty, and it sits across the other side of the Orwell Bridge. It's one of the only churches to do so. The building is made up of a small medieval church and a large Victorian extension which was designed by William Butterfield in 1872, and a church has existed on this site since the 10th century. Richard Hall Gower is buried in this churchyard. He was an English sea captain. St Mary's has always been known as the railway church, just because of its location. The railway, can't see it from here, but is over there. St Mary's was always known as the railway church because of its proximity to where the railway is situated. It sits on this beautiful garden. We're going to have a little wander around this garden, and as you can see, it's very mounded. The churchyard is very mounded. The site is the only one of the 12 medieval churches outside the town centre. And as recently as 1801, the population of the parish was just 385. Well, if I pan round, you can see how many houses are around here now, and it goes back a long way, so it's substantially more than 385. The impact that the railway had coming to a town like Ipswich, which was already a busy industrial port, should not be underestimated, and by 1871 the population of the parish had grown to more than 3,000. Let's just have a little wander. And looking at this churchyard now, there's very few headstones here, and yet there are so many people buried here. They are layered, which is why the churchyard is so mounded, because it's layer upon layer of Stoke residents. Now, just over this way by the traffic lights, as you can see, we look like we're going uphill. That is Stoke Hall, and that would have been a place for those with more money. I'm going to come back so we can have a look at the rear of the church, and you can get a much better view. It is a very handsome building, as you can see. The whole church complex is somewhat skewed. However, we can still refer to the main door as the south porch. In 1863 it was replaced, and a Tudor red brick double height porch, which apparently resembled Wolsey's gate, which is on College Street, that was installed. Now I'm just going to have a look at this building. Look at this. I mean, it's just fabulous. And to think how long it's been here. The wall for the church, as you can see, goes right round the perimeter of the church, and you would never believe that there's 3,600 people buried in this churchyard, so much so that they of course have had to stop accepting burials. Now, there is apparently a secret entrance or a side entrance or an archway that has been a little bit obscured, and that would have been for the more wealthy parishioners. So we even have gravestones here. Turn up and have a look at the tower. still have a few floodlights on. Now, although it's covered by shrubbery, there is an access between the original Stoke Hall, which was built by the wine merchant Thomas Cartwright in 1744, and the church, and that entrance for the richer people. I'm going to see if we can see it, if it's behind one of these. Yes, I think it is. I think we can just about make it out behind there. That would have been for those who had a little bit more money. And burial stones up against the wall. Although, if that was Stoke Hall, which is over that side, it would suggest that the entrance is over there. So the tower here stands at 50 feet, which is not one of the tallest in town. When you compare it to St. Peter's, that is 93 feet. So the ornate red brick porch that I was talking about, the one that resembled, or supposedly resembled, Wolsey's Gate, was demolished in 1863, and it was replaced with this much simpler stone entrance, and that was built by Henry Luff. Just going to watch my footing as I go down off of this mound. And we'll walk up to the doorway. Henry Luff was a very fine Ipswich builder and designer of buildings, and he also designed the Freemasons' Hall on Soane Street. You can see how beautiful this porchway is. We'll come up and have a look at some of the detail around the outside. Look at that stonework. And you just don't see things like that anymore. The present wooden doors on here, together with their ironworks, which is their hinges and locks, also date from 1863, although it is locked up, so we can't actually go in and have a look at that. And with all likelihood, these were made by Henry Ringham, and he was a very prolific Suffolk wood carver, and his work and wood carvings include some of the most amazing pew ends in St Mary Le Tower Church, which is now Ipswich Minster, and that will be included on this walk as well. St Mary at Stoke has a historical set of floor tiles, and they were once actually covered by carpet, but they've now been exposed, and they feature a Minton design. Look at the beautiful detail of this church. Look at the checkerboard pattern on the back. It's a shame that we can't appreciate the stained glass windows that are on here either. So the tiles, they are a Minton design. They were chosen by Butterfield, and they have a significant historical feature in this church, showcasing fine detailing like the repeated IHS inscription, and IHS meaning Jesus Honium Salvator, which is Greek Latin. I have to say, it's such a beautiful church. It's so well kept, which is a nod to its parishioners. Now, I visited here on a Heritage Day, and on the Heritage Day I was told that those tiles that are in the aisle are also the same tiles that were taken from here, not this church, but from this area, to the United States. It escapes my mind as to where they were taken, but they are now in a church in the United States. Given historical significance, and that I have found in my travels that the eastern side of the United States has more historical features than the western side, just because of the populace of the eastern side inhabiting first. That's where they'll be. I will have to call in and speak to somebody on an open day just to find out, to confirm that. But this is the beautiful St Mary at Stoke. Used to be termed St Mary over Stoke because you used to have to come over Stoke Bridge to get to it. Right, let's carry on.